I think he's lying.
Is that a gram?
New card. What do you think?
Whoa. Very nice. Look at that.
It's very cool, Bateman, but that's nothing. Look at this.
That is really nice.
What do you think?
Nice.
If you're watching this video, you probably know all about ETS2. It's got like a bajillion good reviews on Steam, and if you're like me, it was probably your first sim driving game. Not counting The Simpsons Road Rage, of course. But Euro Truck Simulator 1, I guess, its predecessor, hasn't nearly gotten the same amount of attention. I decided to give it a go since the Steam page specifically reassured me that the game is still relevant today.
So that was a fucking lie.
ETS probably wasn't a bad game when it came out in 2008, but nowadays it's completely outclassed by ETS2 or American Truck Simulator. Playing it was tedious and painful, like riding a bike without a seat. Some people might be into that, but it's just not my cup of tea. Even before I started playing the game, it wasn't off to a great start, as despite my best troubleshooting, I couldn't get my T150 racing wheel to work. The game detected it and I was able to use the pedals, but it just couldn't seem to pick up the input for the wheel itself. And I wasn't able to find any guides for how to fix this because ETS2 absolutely destroys the search results when you try to look up any info on ETS. But I thought, hey, no problem, I've used a gamepad for years before I got a wheel, I can just go back to using that. This time the game picked up my knockoff Xbox controller's inputs just fine, but I found it hard to find a combination of steering sensitivity settings that I liked. Something always felt too sticky or a little too sensitive. And the fact that the virtual steering wheel seems to move way faster than it should didn't really help with this feeling. It really messed up my perspective on how much I expected to turn. I didn't want to mess up my Xbox controller settings in its software to try and fix the controls, so I decided to commit the ultimate sin, playing with a mouse and keyboard. Using the keyboard for steering and the mouse to look around was an improvement, but the controls were still a constant annoyance. The constant tapping on my A and D keys to make slight turn adjustments made me feel like 1% of an OSU player, and it scared me. The more I flicked my wrist and mashed those buttons, the more I could smell my own body odor and feel the touch of a woman receding from possibility. Eventually, I settled on using the mouse to control the wheel, but I don't really like this style of movement. You can't look around without holding a free look key, and something about using the mouse like this just feels inaccurate. I think it's hard to move your mouse left or right the exact same amount every time, and you're bound to curve it slightly when you're rotating at the elbow, so it just feels kind of inconsistent. TLDR, on pretty much all of these settings, vehicle handling felt bad, and was probably the root of most of my issues with each control type. It just never seems like your ability to turn is consistent. Often, turning the wheel quite a bit seems to do nothing until it's as if your tires suddenly start working again and you jerk off to the side. I think the game might be attempting to copy how a vehicle's ability to turn is different depending on your speed, but it just ends up feeling unnatural and arcadey. On top of a shitty driving experience, ETS's tiny map and how it handles progression makes things way less interesting than ETS2 or ATS. Much like in those games, when you start the game, you choose a country to start in, but here you're locked to that country and the nearest two. You need to pay to access new ones, and it's not cheap, so in the beginning you'll be confined to a pretty small region. And the scaling of these countries and the roads is much smaller compared to both those games, so you don't really have many options for different routes and destinations. I mean, look at this, France only has 3 cities and like 4 or 5 main highways, and it's a big country. So you end up repeating the same routes again and again. It gets pretty boring, and the look and feel of the game doesn't really help with breaking up the monotony. Now, I'm not complaining about the graphics here, I actually think they're pretty good for a 15-year-old game, especially the truck models. I'm talking about the world design. The scenery of these roads is one note for the most part. There are some changes in the biomes and a few unique features here and there, but for the most part nothing really stands out or makes you feel like you're in some recognizable and interesting place in Europe. The cities also suffer from this big time. While a common criticism of the cities in ETS2's base game is that a lot of them are very samey, it's even worse here. ETS's cities feel almost completely identical, with no real unique architecture or distinguishing features. Their road layouts are pretty much the same, just being a square with a couple exit routes. If it weren't for the occasional landmark located in the distance out of bounds, you practically couldn't tell them apart. I don't expect it from this game, of course, but I would love for a trucking game to come out which actually designs somewhat realistic and large cities. I feel like that would be very immersive. But getting back on track here, ETS also lacks a lot of the mechanics that ETS 2 has, like company management, skill trees, or in-depth vehicle customization. For example, your rank seems to serve as nothing more than a series of milestones. If there's any benefit to ranking up, it's not really made clear on this screen where you do it. Upgrading your truck is also pretty bare bones. You don't actually get to modify your truck's components, you just put points into attributes. These apparently change your vehicle's characteristics, but I didn't notice much difference. It's pretty lame, and I never really felt like my truck was getting better or like I was earning upgrades. Overall, I don't feel like ETS gives much for players to aim for. This is normally the point in the video where I'd suggest something they could have done better, like opening up the map from the start or making a different progression system, but like, ETS 2 exists. What's the point of saying what the devs should have done better when it's just like right there, man? The reason I like ATS and ETS 2 so much is because you have little goals like exploring the map, expanding the company, progressing your skills, or upgrading your truck to work towards. And on top of that, of course, vehicle handling feels good on every control scheme in those games.
This right here is my favorite thing ever. In the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long.
ETS doesn't do a lot of these things, and those it does do are poor compared to its older siblings. So what exactly does ETS even have to offer? This doesn't happen often, but after a while I started dreading having to play this game for the sake of making this video. It's not terrible or glitchy, it's just plain boring and the controls suck. Honestly, I see no reason to play this game in 2023 unless you're interested in the history of the franchise or are just trying to farm some content for YouTube like I am. If you're new to the genre and you're just looking to try out a truck sim, don't start with ETS just because it's cheap. Just wait for ETS 2 to go on sale. It regularly goes down to like $5, so just pick it up then. Like, even if ETS is only $5 at its base price, for only a little bit more than that, you could buy the literary masterpiece, How to Masturbate at Your Office Without Getting Caught, and you'll have way more fun with that. Trust me, just give this game a skip. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, give this video a like. It really helps me out. I know it's been a while since my last video, but real life stuff was pretty hectic recently. That's over now though, so I plan to put out a bunch of new videos this summer, so stay tuned.